Rhea stared out of the train window, her hands clutching a small box of freshly baked cake and a bouquet of her favorite chrysanthemums. Each passing mile felt like a heartbeat racing toward a dream she had carefully nurtured for 7 years. Arav, her childhood friend, was everything she had ever wished for, charming, protective, and unknowingly the keeper of her heart. Tonight, under the moonlit skies at their old bridge, she would confess her love. Her best friend Tara's words echoed in her mind. Rhea, this is your moment. You've waited too long. Trust me, Arav will understand your feelings. Go for it. But as the train screeched to a halt and she stepped onto the cold platform of their small town, a gnawing sense of unease crept into her chest. The bridge wasn't far from the station. It was a place where she and Arav had spent countless evenings as kids, throwing pebbles into the water and sharing secrets. Tonight, it would mark a turning point in her life, or so she thought. The air was crisp as Rhea walked toward the bridge. Her heart fluttered with anticipation, each step heavier than the last. She rehearsed her words silently, glancing at the flowers in her hand, but as she approached the clearing, her breath caught. Under the pale glow of the moonlight, Arav stood at the center of the bridge. His familiar silhouette, so comforting and warm, was now wrapped around someone else. Tara. Rhea froze as Arav tucked a stray strand of Tara's hair behind her ear, leaning in to press a soft kiss on her lips. Tara's laughter was like nails on a chalkboard, each note tearing at Rhea's chest. A sharp ache surged through her as she stumbled forward, the sound of her footsteps betraying her presence. Arav turned sharply, his face darkening as his gaze landed on her. "What are you doing here, Rhea?" His voice was cold, detached. "Can't you see I'm busy?" Her throat dried up. The words she had prepared so carefully now felt meaningless. She glanced at Tara, whose expression was one of smug satisfaction, a twisted smile playing on her lips. Before Rhea could respond, a low chuckle echoed from the shadows. "You didn't tell her, did you?" Rhea turned to see Kian, Arav's enigmatic roommate, leaning casually against a nearby tree. His eyes sparkled with mischief as he walked closer. Poor Rhea, she didn't get the memo about tonight's little arrangement. "Enough, Kian," Arav snapped, his jaw tightening. But Kian wasn't done. He tilted his head toward Rhea, his voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a dagger to her heart. "You should have stayed home, Rhea. Some truths aren't meant to be uncovered." Rhea's vision blurred as Kian's words lingered in the air. Her heart, once filled with hope, now sank under the weight of confusion and betrayal. Arav's cold gaze pierced her more deeply than she could have imagined. I thought, she stammered, her voice trembling as the bouquet slipped from her hands, petals scattering across the bridge. "Thought what, Rhea?" Arav's voice was sharp, almost cruel. "That I was waiting here for you?" A muffled laugh escaped Tara's lips as she intertwined her fingers with Arav's, leaning into his side. The sight tore at Rhea's resolve, but it was Kian's next words that chilled her to the bone. "Careful, Arav. She might figure it out sooner than you planned," Kian said with a sly smirk, his eyes darting between Arav and Tara. "Shut up, Kian!" Arav's voice boomed, startling everyone. The outburst sent a wave of tension across the bridge, and for a moment, all Rhea could hear was the gentle rustling of the trees and the distant flow of the river beneath. But Kian's smirk only deepened. Rhea couldn't move. Her feet felt rooted to the ground even as every instinct told her to run. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice firmer than she expected. "Why is he saying these things? Why are you with Tara?" Arav opened his mouth to speak, but Tara was quicker. "Why does it matter, Rhea?" Tara said sweetly, her tone dripping with false concern. "Did you really think Arav would ever see you as more than just a friend?" Those words cut deep, but something in Tara's smile felt off. It wasn't just the gloating of someone who had won. It was the smirk of someone who knew they had orchestrated the game from the start. "Why?" Rhea whispered, her voice barely audible. Tara leaned closer, her voice low enough that only Rhea could hear. "Because watching you hope, struggle, and fail is so much more fun." Before Rhea could react, Kian stepped forward. "All right, enough theatrics," he said, his playful tone turning serious. He looked at Rhea with an expression she couldn't quite place. Was it pity, amusement, or something else entirely? "Rhea, do you really want to know the truth?" he asked. "Because it's darker than you think." Chapter 4, The Storm Within. Arav grabbed Kian's arm, his grip tight. Don't. But Kian shrugged him off, his gaze never leaving Ria's. She deserves to know. Ria's heart raced. Part of her wanted to leave, to escape the humiliation and pain, but something about Kian's tone held her in place. Tara didn't win Arav over by chance, Kian began. She forced his hand. Blackmail, threats, manipulation, you name it. Arav's family is involved in something complicated, and Tara has all the leverage she needs to keep him wrapped around her finger. Ria's eyes widened as she looked at Arav. Is that true? She asked, her voice breaking. Arav turned away, his silence more damning than any confession. She's dangerous, Ria, Kian continued, stepping closer. And trust me, she won't stop until she has everything. The world spun around Ria. Was this the same Tara who had comforted her through heartbreaks? The same Arav who had promised to protect her? What do you mean by everything? Ria asked, her voice trembling. Kian hesitated for the first time, glancing at Tara. Let's just say she has plans, big ones. And you were never supposed to be part of them. Ria's stomach churned. The bridge that had once been a symbol of childhood innocence now felt like a stage for betrayal. Tara, Ria said, her voice sharp. Why? What did I ever do to you? Tara tilted her head, her smile fading. You existed. That was enough. As the moonlight reflected on the dark waters below, Ria found herself trembling. Kian's words gnawed at her soul, but amidst the chaos, her heart ached with memories of Arav, the boy who had been her entire world since childhood. Flashback. A boy who changed everything. Ria had always believed that Arav was her safe harbor. She remembered the first time they met when she was 8 years old. She'd fallen off her bike, her knees scraped and tears streaming down her face. Arav, the boy with a crooked smile and messy hair, had rushed to her side, placing a Band-Aid on her wound like a knight with a paper sword. You're a warrior now, he'd said, grinning. No tears allowed. From that moment, Ria had loved him. She loved the way his laugh lit up a room, the way he always looked out for her, and the way he made her feel invincible. Through the years, her love grew, hidden behind shy glances and unspoken words. Every gesture, every shared memory was etched into her heart, but she never dared to tell him. He had been her everything, and she feared losing the friendship that defined her life. Kian's silent love. Ria's memories of Arav filled her heart with a bittersweet ache as chaos erupted on the bridge. But she wasn't alone in her longing. There was someone else who had silently watched her for years, holding his feelings deep within. Kian, as he stood between her and the danger Tara had unleashed, his mind raced with thoughts he'd buried for too long. Kian had always been the shadow to her sunshine, the one who stayed at the edge of her orbit, content to watch her glow. He remembered the first time he saw her, years ago at a school event where she and Arav had competed in a quiz. Ria's excitement, her nervous energy, the way she cheered when Arav answered correctly, it had all captivated Kian. She didn't even know he existed then, but that day, she became his entire world. When Arav became her closest friend, Kian kept his distance. He told himself it was enough to see her happy, even if it wasn't with him. But as the years passed and Arav took her for granted, Kian's quiet adoration turned into something deeper. Now, on this bridge, with danger surrounding them, Kian's emotions threatened to spill over. Chapter 8. A dangerous confession. As one of Tara's attackers lunged at Kian, he dodged with a precision born of desperation. Grabbing a fallen steel pipe, he swung it hard, knocking the man unconscious. Panting, he turned to Ria, who stood frozen in terror. Are you okay? He asked, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. Ria nodded, tears streaming down her face. Kian, I don't understand any of this. Why is this happening? He stepped closer, gripping her shoulders firmly. Because Tara's a monster, and Arav didn't protect you the way he should have, the way I would have. Ria blinked, startled by the intensity in his voice. Before she could respond, Tara's laughter rang out, sharp and cold. Touching, Kian, Tara sneered. Is this your moment to play the hero? How noble. Kian's jaw tightened, but he didn't let go of Ria. You're done, Tara. Whatever game you're playing, it ends now. Tara tilted her head, her smile venomous. You think you can save her, don't you? That's adorable. But tell me, Kian, does she even know how you feel? Or have you been too scared to admit that you've loved her all this time? Ria's breath caught. The world seemed to tilt as Tara's words sank in. She turned to Kian, searching his face for answers. Kian, she whispered, her voice trembling. Is it true? Kian's expression softened, his usual cocky bravado slipping away. Rhea, this isn't the time. Answer me, she pleaded, her eyes glistening. Kian hesitated, his heart pounding. For years, he'd dreamed of telling her, but not like this. Not in the middle of chaos and danger. Still, the truth was out now, and there was no taking it back. Yes, he said quietly, his voice breaking. It's true, I've loved you for as long as I can remember, but it doesn't matter, Rhea. Not right now. What matters is keeping you safe. Chapter 9, The Unraveling. Tara clapped mockingly, her voice dripping with scorn. Well, isn't this a lovely little drama? The quiet one finally confesses his love. Too bad it's all for nothing. Before anyone could react, Tara pulled a small device from her pocket. Kian's eyes widened as he recognized it. A remote detonator. Tara, no, he shouted, stepping in front of Rhea. Tara's grin widened. You think I'd let you win, Kian? You don't get to take everything from me. If I can't have control, no one will. The bridge shuddered as an explosion rocked its foundations. Flames erupted from one side, cutting off their escape route. The air filled with smoke and debris, and Rhea screamed as the ground beneath her shook violently. Chapter 10, The Edge of Survival. Kian grabbed Rhea's hand, pulling her toward the remaining end of the bridge. Arav followed, his face pale as he glanced at the growing flames. Tara's insane, Arav muttered, his voice trembling. We have to get out of here. Kian shot him a glare. You think? Maybe you should have thought about that before letting her manipulate you. This isn't the time for your ego, Kian, Arav snapped. We're all in this mess together. Rhea's voice cut through their argument, sharp and commanding. Stop it, both of you. They fell silent, the urgency of the situation sinking in. Behind them, Tara stood at the center of the chaos, her laughter echoing like a specter. Run, little heroes, she taunted. But you'll never escape me. Kian tightened his grip on Rhea's hand, his voice steady despite the panic in his eyes. I'll get you out of this, Rhea, I swear. As they made their way toward safety, Rhea's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the weight of everything she'd learned tonight. Arav, the boy she'd loved for years, had betrayed her trust, and Kian, the boy who'd always been by her side, had been hiding a love so deep it shook her to her core. For the first time, she saw Kian not as a friend or a protector, but as something more. And despite the chaos, a tiny spark of hope flickered in her chest. The world seemed to slow as the trio reached the far end of the crumbling bridge. Smoke billowed behind them, the fiery chaos casting an eerie glow across their faces. Rhea's lungs burned, her heart pounding in her chest, not just from the escape, but from the storm brewing inside her. Kian released her hand once they reached safety, but the warmth of his touch lingered. Arav stood a few steps away, his head down, guilt radiating from him in waves. Rhea glanced between the two, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. The ghost of love. For so many years, Arav had been her anchor, the boy who held her heart without even realizing it. She had loved him with a quiet intensity, believing in a future that now felt like an illusion. But tonight, that image of Arav had shattered. His betrayal, his blind trust in Tara, his indifference to her feelings. It all cut deeper than she thought possible. And yet, it wasn't just the pain of his betrayal that consumed her. It was the truth Kian had revealed. Kian's hidden devotion. Rhea turned to Kian, her eyes searching his face. He looked away, his jaw tight, as if bracing himself for rejection. For years, he had been her constant, a steady presence in the background of her life. She had leaned on him without realizing how much he had given, how deeply he had cared. Memories flooded back, clearer now than ever before. The way Kian would always have her favorite snacks during study sessions. How he'd stood up for her against bullies in school, even when it meant getting into trouble. The way he watched her during their group outings, his gaze lingering as if she were the only thing that mattered. All the little things she had dismissed as friendship now took on a new meaning. Rhea. Kian's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He stood a step away, his expression guarded, but his eyes full of unspoken emotion. I know you probably hate me for what I said back there. I shouldn't have. Stop, Rhea interrupted, her voice trembling. She took a step closer, her eyes locked on his. Why didn't you tell me before? Kian's breath hitched. Because I didn't want to lose you, he admitted. You were so in love with Arav, And I didn't want to make things harder for you. Seeing you happy, even from a distance, was enough for me. Enough? She echoed, her voice breaking. Kian, how could that ever be enough? Chapter 12, A New Light. As Kian stared at her, something shifted in Ria's heart. For so long, she had been chasing a love that wasn't meant for her, blinded by her devotion to Arav. But Kian, he had always been there, loving her in ways she hadn't even noticed. Tears welled up in her eyes as she took another step closer. You've been there for me through everything, haven't you? And I was too blind to see it. Kian shook his head, a bittersweet smile tugging at his lips. Don't do this out of pity, Ria. You don't owe me anything. It's not pity, she said softly, reaching for his hand. It's realizing that I've been holding on to something broken while ignoring what's been whole and true all along. Kian froze, his eyes widening. Ria. But before he could say more, she leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. The world around them seemed to fade, the chaos of the night forgotten. You've been my rock, my safe place, she whispered. And I think I've loved you all along. I was just too afraid to let go of the past. Kian's hand cupped her cheek, his touch tender yet firm. Ria, you don't have to say this. Not now, not after everything. I want to, she interrupted, her voice steady. I need to, because if there's one thing tonight has taught me, it's that I can't keep running from what's right in front of me. A new beginning. As the first rays of dawn broke through the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Ria and Kian stood together, their shadows intertwined. Arav watched from a distance, regret etched on his face. He had lost her, not just to his mistakes, but to the boy who had loved her more deeply than he ever could. Ria turned to Kian, a soft smile breaking through her tears. Thank you for always being there, even when I didn't deserve it. You've always deserved it, Ria, he replied, his voice filled with quiet conviction. In that moment, as the bridge stood behind them in ruins, Ria felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. For the first time, she wasn't looking back at what could have been. She was looking forward, toward a future she hadn't dared to imagine. One where love wasn't about pain or betrayal, but about trust, devotion, and a bond that could weather any storm. And it started with Kian. The morning light brought clarity, but it didn't erase the lingering shadows. As they left the bridge behind, the echoes of Tara's twisted game and Arav's betrayal lingered in the air like smoke. Ria walked beside Kian, her hand brushing his now and then. Every accidental touch sent a jolt through her, a reminder of the new reality she was stepping into. For so long, her heart had been tied to Arav, but now it beat for someone else, someone who had loved her through silence and storms. But as they reached a safe distance, something tugged at her mind, a piece of the puzzle she hadn't yet put together. Kian's secrets began to unfold. Kian, she said softly, her voice breaking the fragile stillness. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. What is it? You knew about Tara's plans, didn't you? Before tonight, I mean, she said, searching his face for answers. The way you fought her men, the way you weren't surprised by what she did, it felt like you knew more than you let on. Kian stiffened, the lines of his jaw tightening. Ria, it's not important right now. What matters is that you're safe. No, she said firmly, stepping in front of him. It does matter. I need to know the truth, Kian. You've always been there for me, but I've never really known why. And tonight, when everything fell apart, you seemed prepared, like you've been carrying a burden I didn't see. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. You're not wrong, he admitted, but it's complicated. Then uncomplicate it, she said, her voice trembling. Please, Kian. I can't move forward with you, not truly, if there are still secrets between us. The truth about Tara and Arav. Kian hesitated, his eyes searching hers as if weighing how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke. Tara wasn't just after Arav, he said. She was after me too. Ria's breath hitched. What? Why? Because of my father, Kian said quietly, his voice heavy with regret. He's a powerful man in ways I wish he weren't. Tara's family had dealings with him years ago. Dangerous ones. When those deals fell apart, her family blamed mine for their losses. She's been holding that grudge ever since, waiting for a chance to strike. Ria's mind raced, trying to process his words. So, this wasn't just about Arav and me. It was about revenge against your family? Partly, Kian admitted. But Tara used Arav as a pawn. She manipulated him into thinking she cared about him, just like she manipulated you into believing she was your friend. She wanted to hurt everyone connected to me, starting with you. Ria's chest tightened. Why me? Keon looked away, guilt flashing across his face. Because she knew what you meant to me. She knew hurting you would destroy me. The weight of love and guilt. Ria stared at him, her heart pounding. You knew she was targeting me, and you didn't say anything. I didn't want to scare you, he said, his voice cracking. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could protect you without dragging you into my family's mess. Tears welled up in her eyes. Kian, you should have told me. Do you know how much pain you could have saved me if I'd known the truth sooner? I know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I hate myself for it. But Ria, I swear, I never wanted you to get hurt. All I've ever wanted is to keep you safe. She wiped her tears, her emotions a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and something deeper, a love that refused to be extinguished, even in the face of betrayal. Kian, she said softly, I need time to process all of this, but I also need you to promise me something. Anything, he said, his eyes pleading. No more secrets, she said firmly. If we're going to move forward, we have to face everything together, no matter how hard it is. He nodded, his gaze steady. I promise. The calm before the storm. As the sun climbed higher, Ria and Kian found themselves walking side by side once more. Arav had slipped away at some point, his absence a silent acknowledgement of his mistakes. Ria's thoughts churned, but as she glanced at Kian, she felt a new sense of clarity. He wasn't perfect, and his secrets had hurt her, but his love was real. And in the end, that was what mattered most. I never thanked you, she said suddenly. For what? Kian asked, surprised. For always being there, she said, her voice soft. For loving me, even when I didn't see it, and for fighting for me, even when I didn't deserve it. Kian stopped walking, turning to face her. You've always deserved it, Ria. You just didn't realize it. She smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. Well, I realize it now. And I think I might be ready to fight for you too. Kian's breath hitched, his eyes searching hers for confirmation. Slowly, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Are you sure? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, stepping closer. I've never been more sure of anything. As their foreheads touched, the weight of the past began to lift, replaced by a love that burned brighter than the pain they'd endured. The days following Ria's confession to Kian were a blur of emotions, like a storm that passed, leaving everything changed in its wake. The bond between them had deepened in ways Ria hadn't imagined possible. Yet, even in the peaceful moments, the shadows of the past still loomed over them. Kian had been open about the secrets he'd kept, but Ria couldn't shake the feeling that there was more than the twisted tale of Tara's vengeance. She could sense Kian was holding something back, something so heavy it weighed on him with every word he spoke. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Ria couldn't keep her thoughts to herself any longer. She needed the truth, the complete truth. Kian, she said, her voice low, there's still something you're not telling me, isn't there? About Tara, about your family. He froze, his eyes darkening. His usual calm demeanor cracked for a moment, revealing the raw vulnerability hidden beneath. Ria, he sighed deeply. I promised I'd be honest with you, but there are things I can't share, not yet. Why? She pressed. What could possibly be so dangerous that you can't tell me? Kian's hands tightened around the glass he was holding, his knuckles going white. His gaze shifted toward the window, as if the night itself was hiding the truth. Because it's not just my family Tara's after. It's me. Ria's pulse quickened. What do you mean? It's not just about revenge anymore, Kian said slowly, his voice thick with unspoken fear. Tara, she knows about my father's connections, and she's been using them to control me. What? How? Ria's confusion deepened. I never told you this, Ria, but I've been working for my father's business. More specifically, I've been taking care of things. His words trailed off, his face shadowed by the weight of his confession. Ria's eyes widened. What kind of things? I'm involved in things that are illegal. Things that would ruin everything, my father's business, my name, us. If anyone knew, it could destroy me. Ria stood motionless, processing his words. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Kian, the boy who had always seemed so dependable, so reliable, was tangled in a web of crime. But then her gaze softened, and she stepped toward him, You don't have to protect me from this, Kian. I'm not afraid of the truth. We'll figure this out together, okay? His eyes met hers, and for the first time, Rhea saw the true depth of his fear. He wasn't afraid of losing her. He was afraid of pulling her into the darkness that had consumed him. I didn't want you to be a part of this, he murmured, his voice raw. But now, I can't keep you in the dark any longer. Suddenly, the door to the room burst open, startling both of them. Arav stood there, his face a mask of desperation. Rhea, he said, his voice trembling. I need to talk to you. Please. Rhea's heart dropped. She hadn't seen Arav since the night of the betrayal, and his presence now only reminded her of the unresolved tension between them. Kian, I can't, she said quietly, her eyes flickering back to him. This is something I need to do. Alone. Rhea followed Arav out into the cold night, the air thick with the tension between them. She kept her distance, her eyes fixed on the ground as they walked toward a secluded park bench. Arav stopped, turning to face her. Rhea, I know what happened between us, and I'm sorry, Arav began, his voice cracking. But you need to understand. I never meant to hurt you. I was blinded by Tara's manipulation. I didn't know what was real. Rhea looked at him, her heart conflicted. She could see the remorse in his eyes, but the sting of his betrayal was still fresh. Arav, she said softly, you don't get to decide when I forgive you. You don't get to erase what you've done. I know, he said, his voice breaking. But I've been thinking about everything, about how much I've taken you for granted. I never realized how much you meant to me until I saw you with Kian. It hit me like a brick. Rhea's heart fluttered in a way she hadn't expected. She had spent so long longing for Arav, but the feelings were fading, replaced by the realization that what she had with Kian was something real, something strong. Arav, it's too late, she said, her voice steady. I don't love you anymore. The words felt like a weight lifted from her chest. It wasn't a relief. She wasn't ready to move on completely. But it was the truth. And the truth was the only thing she could cling to in this moment. The final decision. Back at the apartment, Kian was waiting for her, pacing the floor in worry. The look on his face softened when he saw her, but there was a question in his eyes. Well, he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Rhea stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. It's over with Arav. He's part of my past now. I'm not going back there. Kian's face softened, his relief palpable. Rhea, you don't know how much that means to me. I think I'm finally starting to realize how much you've always meant to me, she whispered, her hands reaching out for his. But just as their fingers brushed, a sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. Kian's face hardened in an instant. Who the hell? Before he could finish, the door swung open. A shadowy figure stepped into the room. Tara, her lips twisted into a smug smile. You really thought you could escape me, didn't you? Tara's voice was venomous. Rhea's heart skipped a beat. The calm they had fought for had been ripped away in an instant, and now Tara had come to claim what she believed was hers. Tara's presence in the room felt like a cold gust of wind cutting through everything Kian and Rhea had built. The door slammed shut behind her, her figure towering with a sense of dominance and malicious intent. So, this is how it ends? Tara's voice was smooth, but every word carried the weight of danger. She glanced from Rhea to Kian, a wicked smile curling at the corners of her lips. You really thought you could escape me, didn't you? Rhea's heart pounded in her chest, but she held her ground, her eyes locked with Tara's. What do you want, Tara? We've already been through enough. Just go away. Tara chuckled softly, the sound chilling. Oh, Rhea, you really think I'm going to let you walk away from all of this unscathed? She turned her attention to Kian, her gaze icy. You, of all people, should know that there are consequences for crossing me. Did you really believe I wouldn't come after everything you care about? Kian stepped forward, his jaw clenched. Stay away from her, Tara. This ends tonight. But Tara was unfazed, her eyes glinting with something darker, something more dangerous. No, Kian, this doesn't end until I say it does. And Rhea, she said, her gaze turning cruel, you really should know better. You think you've won, that you found something real with him? You're just another pawn in this game. Kian can't protect you, not from what's coming. Rhea's blood ran cold as Tara's words echoed in her mind. She had always known Tara was dangerous, but hearing her so confident, so certain, sent a shiver down her spine. "You don't scare me, Tara," Rhea said, trying to steady her breath, but inside, she felt a growing unease. "Oh, but I do," Tara purred, stepping closer to Kian. "I always have. And you, sweet little Rhea, you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." Kian moved to stand between them, his hand gripping Rhea's, a silent reassurance that he wouldn't let anything happen to her. Tara's eyes narrowed. "You really think you can stand in my way, Kian? You think you can save her from me?" Her voice dropped to a whisper, full of venom. "The truth is, you're just as much a part of this game as I am. You're no hero. You've been playing at being one, but in the end, you're just like your father, dangerous, ruthless, and guilty." The air thickened with tension as Tara's words sunk into the room, each syllable a dagger aimed at Kian's heart. Rhea's mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos surrounding them. "Enough of your games, Tara," Kian said, his voice laced with fury. But there was a flicker of something, guilt, in his eyes. Tara's smirk widened, and she took a step forward, her gaze unwavering. "Don't you see, Kian? This has always been about control. You thought you could keep me at bay with your lies, but you never understood the power I hold over you." Kian's hand tightened around Rhea's, as though trying to anchor himself in the storm. "What the hell are you talking about? Did you really think you were in control of anything? Did you really think you were protecting Rhea?" Tara's eyes flickered with dark amusement. "You're just a pawn in a much bigger game, my game." Rhea's heart raced as she turned to Kian. "What is she talking about?" Her voice trembled, the weight of Tara's words pressing down on her chest. Kian's face went pale, the blood draining from his cheeks. He looked at Tara as though she had just revealed the deepest secret he had buried for years. "No, it can't be." Tara smiled, knowing she had struck a nerve. "Oh, but it is, Kian. Your father's dirty business, the one you thought was buried long ago, it's all still very much alive, and I'm the one who controls it now. You never stood a chance." Rhea's mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. Kian had never fully explained his involvement in his father's business, but she had never imagined it was this dark. "You're lying," Kian spat, but there was no conviction in his voice. Deep down, he knew it was true.
Tara laughed softly. "Am I? Or am I just the one who's willing to do whatever it takes to get what I want?" The heart of the game, Rhea looked at Kian, searching his eyes for the man she had trusted. But now, the cracks in his facade were undeniable. She saw the guilt, the shame, the fear. He had been part of something much darker than she had realized. "Why didn't you tell me, Kian?" Rhea whispered, her voice filled with hurt. "Why didn't you trust me enough to share this with me?" Kian's gaze dropped to the floor, unable to meet her eyes. "I was trying to protect you. I thought you would leave me if you knew the truth. But now, I can't protect you from this. Tara has everything. She's been using me, using my father's connections to manipulate everyone." "Then we'll fight her together," Rhea said, her voice firm, despite the tremor in her heart. "We'll fight this together, Kian." Tara's laughter cut through the air like a knife. "Fight me?" She looked at Rhea with contempt. "You think you can fight me? You're both trapped. And you have no idea just how deep this goes." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. Kian's body stiffened, his eyes darting toward the door. Tara's smirk grew wider. "I'll leave you two lovebirds to think about your future," she said mockingly. "But remember, Kian, no matter what you do, I always win in the end." As she turned to leave, Kian grabbed Ray's arm, his grip tight. "We can't let her win. We can't let her control us." Rhea looked up at him, her eyes full of determination. "We won't. But first, we need to understand exactly what she's doing. We need to uncover the truth, about your father, about everything." But as the door clicked shut behind Tara, they both knew that this was just the beginning. The game had only started, and the stakes were higher than ever before.